Se si Xomitec mi paki se ti xosis lo hosata mi mospamashi bostotoi.
Hey everybody, welcome to another Conlang Showcase. Welcome to 2023. Now, I thought I was done doing Conlang Showcases for the Dog Days world, at least for a little while, but after my obsession went down a bit of a rabbit hole, I realized that I kind of needed to do a few more, so I figured I'd kick off the year with a good one, a really weird one, that being Shomatec. Now, when you're looking at this, you gotta keep in mind that, first of all, Shomatec is the English name for the language that I used in my stories going back to when I was like 10 years old. I think I first introduced the Shomatec civilization and the Xomitec Empire in like 2010, which, you know, if you're keeping track of the Agma Schwa lore, that's like way before Arodjun was created or any of the Conlangs are created. So, in this situation, Xomitec is an anglicization of the phonolization of the Xomitec people's actual, like, endonym. To them, it's mi.te. So, all these stories go back to when I was like 10 years old. I've got all kinds of cringy looking little paint drawn maps and stuff showing Xomitec versus Alphonse Casanosha and all this stuff. And by the time of the Dog Days comic that I'm writing, which should hopefully be out to the public soon, in 2067 AR, they have conquered the Permechikan Empire. So they are a much more significant player by the time of the comic, thus it is worthy of having a video all to its own. So, let us begin and dive into the Xomitec language.
Welcome to mi.te, or Xomitec, which is a Shomaksh language within the broader Qrnql language family, by me, ŋimp. So let's cover the background. Xomitec is a Shomaksh language, which is part of the larger and much more ancient Qrnql language family, spoken mostly through what we call Central America and northwestern South America, with recent expansion as far north as Mexico and Texas. Now, by 2012 AR, the Xomitec Empire conquered Permechikan and some of the Phonology Peninsula during what they call the Xomitec War. It maintains control of a vast swath of territory by 2067 AR, when the comic Dog Days takes place. In the south, the Xomitec is the native language of tens of millions, while in the north, it's just the language of government and business, ruling over a population that vastly speaks Permechikan, Qrnql, and many other languages as their L1s. So Xomitec is more of a lingua franca there. History. So, around 14,000 years before the rediscovery of human technology, the Proto-Qrnql culture thrived in the upper Rocky Mountains and much of North America during the warmest climactic period seen in tens of thousands of years prior. As the climate gradually cooled, the Proto-Qrnql society gradually fragmented. By 12,000 BR, the rapidly expanding Proto-Pernth groups forced the Qrnql to split into northern and southern branches. The southern branch would be continually forced south for thousands of years before permanently settling in ŋimp, the northern coast of South America, as we would call it in English, by 4000 BR. Dog linguists call this the mysterious origin of the Xomaksh language family. It's so far back in time when the Qrnql people were united that nobody in this world who's actually considered a serious linguist or a serious archaeologist, none of them would believe you if you told them that the Qrnqls of the north and the Xomaksh of the south were actually from one common origin. It's like saying that Altaic or Nostratic is real. But some people do believe it. And they would be right, but we get to sit back as an audience and kind of laugh about that. Anyway, So the various Xomaksh tribes would farm during the dry seasons and travel in hunter-gatherer style during the wet seasons. During the 1200s through around 800s BR, the Qhilan groups that were up north gradually invaded the Gentry coast and established the precursors to the Gentrixian civilization. This again forced the Xomaksh people to migrate even further southwest. Now these southern Xomaksh tribes began a lifestyle based on the line between the Amazonian jungle and the Andes Mountains, beginning what they call the Qrnql era. During the Qrnql era, the Xomaksh groups coalesced into a handful of more centralized authorities, which would become key powers in the mountains and jungles of Chelsea, which is an anglicization of the Arodjun word for South America, Chelsea, for hundreds of years. The Xomaksh were the most powerful of the tribes for about 1,000 years, from 600 to 1600, on occasions unifying the realms, but most often acting as the most influential of the lot in general. The Xomaksh became the lingua franca of the Xomaksh groups by 900 AR. They had no writing of their own, though they often used logographic symbols for business and taxation transactions that were inspired by the Tyrrell logography from the Tyrrell Islands to the east. In the 1500s, another wave of Qhilan migrations caused significant unrest throughout northern Chelsea. These migrants were nomadic and sedentary refugees fleeing from the chaos during the Permechikan Span dynasty's conquest of much of the continent, culminating in the War of the Pearl and the fall of the Phonology Peninsula to Permechikan. In other news, these refugees mixed with the already declining Xomaksh hegemony, forming an underclass that would last hundreds of years. They spoke Qhilan languages, but were highly literate, writing with the Arodjun alphabet. And this alphabet was easy to use and was adapted to the early modern Shomatec language, adjusting for Shomatec's tonal vowels. This adjusted script is called setai, or branches, by the modern Xomitec peoples. The Xomitec groups remained small but functional kingdoms until an event known as the Unification in 1995, reacting to the weakening of the Permechikan hegemony up north. Soon after that, the Xomitec Empire was established in 1996 after the conquest of the Gentrixian province of Skatai, led by Qrnql, a dictator of royal Xomaksh descent. After the Nashan Empire easily captured and briefly occupied the Permechikan cities of Pthm and Pthm from 2010 to 2011, Qrnql seized his opportunity to sweep his armies through the undefended southern regions of Permechikan. And pretty quickly, Xomitec fully conquered Permechikan, especially after the Nashan occupation of much of the country ended. Since then, the Empire and later Republic of Xomitec has controlled the majority of all Permechikan and Qhilan-speaking peoples. As such, the Xomitec language has been a highly influential one during the 21st century AR.
Alright, and then so I don't have it in the slideshow, but let me also just mention that in order to create this, I started with some of the basic aspects of Proto-Qrnql, of the whole massive Qrnql language family that would be instantly debunked if anyone in-world suggested that it was real. So I started 16,000 BR, or 14,000 BR, so 16,000 plus years before the modern Xomitec language is spoken. And then I went through layers and layers and layers of sound changes using my sound change applier that Eternal made for us on nga.org, SCA++. You should check that out if you haven't yet. And I used SCA++ to evolve the Xomitec language straight from Proto-Qrnql. Tens of thousands of years down the line. It's completely unrecognizable compared to the proto-language, but it's definitely a process that I've spent a whole dang lot of time working on. And if you look at it and think that some of the sound changes I put in there are like really big logical leaps, that's because they kind of are. I was trying to save lines on the SCA, and so when I noticed that I had done like multiple sound changes to the same sound, just kind of universally, I just kind of blended it all into like one rule so it would be simpler on the page. even though like it would look unrealistic if it went straight from point A to point B. There's a bunch of little subpoints that happen in between that. So if you're ever looking at that document when it goes up on nga.org, that's my justification. That's my excuse. Anyway, moving on.
Alright, now we got that out of the way, time for the actual language. In this showcase, I'm going to be going over the phonology, the phonotactics, the morphology, the orthography, the influence that Xomitec has had on modern Permechikan since the conquest, obviously the grammar, so grammatical structures, including some interesting things relating to topic marking, word order, adverbials, clauses, etc., and as usual, a sample text. Pretty standard format at this point. Let's do it. So the consonants in Xomitec are p, t, n, k, m, n, s, sh, hy, h, la. The IPA and the romanization are pretty close to each other. However, sh is represented by X, as you can see in the name of the language, mi.te. And then C is the representation of the palatal sibilant fricative, I should specify. So there is a contrast between sa, sha, and hya in this language. The vowels, including the 4 tones that we have in this language, the vowels are e, 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 u, 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 e, a, o. And as you can see, we have 4 tones here, one of which is the neutral / short tone. Doesn't really have any specified position, but it's usually an unstressed part of the word. Goes by pretty quickly. Never turned into a schwa though. And that is romanized with a period after the vowel. For the high long tone, we have a colon for the romanization. Then we have a high falling tone, which is represented by a semicolon in the romanization. And then we have a low rising tone, which is represented by an apostrophe in the romanization. Since like the normal punctuation marks are used up in this, sentences are ended with like the straight bar for commas and with 2 slashes for periods. And then question marks can stay the same, and if you need an exclamation point in there, you could just put more slashes, I guess. That's up to you. There aren't really many situations where that happens in any of the sample text, but that's how that works. Alright, the phonotactics. So our basic syllable structure is just CV, but overall when you include all the possible situations in the language, it is something like this, with C in parentheses, a required V, and then up to 2 fricatives, or Fs as they are labeled on this. And the Fs can be M, N, S, X, C, or L. F codas can only occur word finally and are only used to make grammatical changes to lemmas. In rare circumstances, 2 F consonants may end a word, also for grammatical purposes, specifically for perfect situations, like perfected verbs. That's when you'll see 2 consonants next to each other. Now, every word must start with a consonant, and sequences of vowels are considered as separate syllables and never diphthongs. You could think of it as more, like in Japanese, or you could think of them as just straight up different syllables, because most of the time both of those situations apply linguistically in Xomitec. Now, the orthography. The modern Jopetoj alphabet was adapted into Tsetai mi.te, or the Xomitec branches or Xomitec writing. The big differences are the tonal varieties of the vowels and the use of capital letters on all nouns and verbs. And what's interesting is, this is one of the only languages in the entire Dog Days canon that actually distinguishes between capital letters and like lowercase letters. In this situation, it's kind of like German in our world, except it's for all nouns and all verbs. You're not going to see any capitalized letters in adjectives or adverbs or like grammatical particles or anything, unless they're starting the sentence. Any word that starts the sentence begins with a capital letter, and any noun and any verb is going to have a capital letter at the beginning of it. Never in the middle, and there are no capitalized versus lowercase distinctions for the vowels, because vowels can never begin words anyway, so why bother? Now, you can also see that the Arodjun letter R, the circle, is adapted into the U vowel in the mi.te version. Additionally, the numbers are base 12, and the number systems that are used are the original Phonology system, like the pre-Prins Phonology system, so base 12, all the way up into the thousands digits. And then after that, when you get to the really big numbers, then there's a hybridized Permechikan numeral system for any digits that go higher than 11,000. Which you can see at the bottom right there. And you can go check out the Permechikan video if you want to see a better explanation of how Permechikan numerals work. But it gets hybridized here, and I think that's pretty cool. Spelling intricacies, there aren't too many. The mi.te script is pretty straightforward, as it was introduced rather recently. Like 1996. There are two main recent sound changes that you may notice when reading the text in mi.te. Now, ma may be written with a letter P in the middle of words, and t may be written with a C before E. And vowels may also be written using the neutral or short tone letters before codal consonants, especially in grammatical particles, even if they do in reality carry different tones. Now, these trends are also pretty sporadic. Sometimes it may occur, sometimes not. You may notice like a dot diacritic added above letters that are acknowledged to be spelled differently from pronunciation. Spelling became official with the introduction of the dictionary in 1996, but since it's so recent that it was like standardized, you might see some varieties in here. Morphology. So Shomatec morphology is relatively simple. There are no prefixes, and there are only a few suffixes that take on different meanings depending on the grammatical positions the words show up in a sentence. All other grammatical information is conveyed with various particles and with the word order itself. Most suffixes were once entire syllables unto themselves, but in most casual speech have been eroded into the codal consonants ma, na, sa, sha, hya, and la. Now, for verbs, you may see the suffixes ma, la, or sa. For topic, subject, object markers, and prepositional suffixes, you may see sa, sha, and na. And then for noun articles, you may see ma. All of these also have their particle versions, which are often used to increase politeness in dialogue, especially with the verb tense suffixes. So, if you see a sentence lengthened in that way, that is just being done for platitudes and to seem more fancy. Let's start with some particles and grammar and stuff before we get into any of the more wacky things. Those sporadic morphemes I was talking about will make sense after we get through this. The sentence structure is most often SOV, or more specifically, the topic noun goes first, then if it is an intransitive sentence, you'll just go straight on to the verb. If it is a transitive sentence, you'll have the topic noun, then the non-topic other noun, which will be labeled with whether it's a subject or an object in the sentence, and then its verb. If it is a ditransitive sentence, then you'll have the topic first, then noun 1, then noun 2, then verb. It doesn't matter the order, except you have to keep in mind the animacy of each noun. So the topic is the most important one, and the animacy doesn't necessarily matter there. But if you do have a ditransitive situation, or whether you put the object or the indirect object first, depends on whether the indirect object is a person or not. If it is a person or a sentient animal, you'll put the indirect object first, and then you'll put the direct object after that, etc. So, questions also technically have a different word order, which we'll discuss later. That's a special situation. So, the pronouns in Xomitec are as follows. For first person singular, it's to. For first person plural, tai. For second person singular, la. As you can see in here, there is a distinction between animate third person and inanimate third person, along with one, the general person, a gnomic general concept of a person. Nothing too crazy in here. Now, for the grammatical particles, every noun in a Xomitec sentence must be followed by a particle denoting its place in the sentence, unless it's part of a really basic copula. We'll get into that later. The particles look like this. You have the topic marker, which is realized in a singular form, a plural form, and a non-nominal form. The same goes for the rest. Those subject markers, indirect object markers, direct object markers. Then there's also the weird one, which is a neutral or mediopassive marker, which is used most of the time for copulas. And then there is a negation marker, which is used for negative copular statements. And that singular version right there, the shu, that is also just the word for no, which may be appended, or even some may consider it prefix, but I just consider it added to the beginning of a noun phrase if you want to negate said noun phrase. So with that in mind, here are a couple basic sentences. First, an intransitive sentence. You have uli, which means my knee hurts, or in general, like a knee, this here knee hurts. It can be implied to be my, because if you're just saying knee hurts, like, who else are you talking about here? Transitive, let's use this example, which means I bought worms, but in the gloss you can see that worms is the topic here, because it is rather interesting that the person is buying worms. This person is specifying that they bought worms in particular, you know? They didn't just go buy stuff, they bought worms. Then you have a ditransitive example down here, which the sentence is which means mother gives a cat to him. This is like a little bit of a kind of a disrespectful sentence, because the indirect object is referring to a person. It's talking about him, her, them, and they are being put into the less animate position here. They're being declared less animate than the cat, which I find rather funny. It's kind of a joke. It's also kind of disrespectful. Now, adjectives. Adjectives precede nouns and are separated from nouns by their own particles. There are 3 potential adjective particles. The most common one is the first one, mi, which is the default, or it could specifically mean currently, meaning that the state that you are describing with this adjective is one that is still in the present, likely attributed to it, or at least at the point in the story. Then ma, which is formerly, and mi, which is hypothetically. So if you look at the first word phrase here, you have shiyuli misai, which means happy child. Currently, the child is happy. Then for formerly, you have shima samo, which means the formerly soft arm, or, you know, my arm, which was once soft. It's coming from a person who just did some big gains. Anyway, and then for me, the hypothetically adjective particle, you have ni nga mi shani, which means a potentially rainy day, or a day which might be rainy. So for verb tense, now the past preterite is the unmarked verb form. if you're saying a verb and it doesn't have one of those special little suffixes that you see down below, it is most likely going to be a past preterite. Sometimes it's not, but that's most of the time. If you're trying to refer to a specific time, you're gonna need to start the sentence with like an adverbial phrase, kind of similar to what they do in Mandarin, like 我今天说中文, I don't know, saying like I today speak Chinese. Except in this situation, you're just putting the time particle at the beginning of the sentence or as an adverb before the verb itself. Tenses are some of the only suffixes permitted in Shomatec, as we explained earlier. They're placed at the end of verbs as follows. So past is unmarked, so tu would be bought. Then the present progressive ending is ma. So tum is buying. Then the present habitual is la. So tul would be buys. He buys stuff a lot. And then future is sa. So you have tus, which is will buy. These suffixes, again, were once their own words. Those words being mo, lui, and soy, but have naturally become suffixes, except for when engaging in highly polite speech, even like jokingly polite speech. So perfect forms exist for the verbs as well. These are the only situations where the double F situation, the phonotactic rule, shows up. So it's basically a deviation from the norm. Now, for past perfect, it's lm. So tulm is had bought, tun is has bought, and tuls is will have bought. And to create more complex perfective constructions, you can just use various adverbs and it'll do the job. Speaking of adverbs, adverbs precede verbs and adjectives. They are often unmarked, though if it's a polysyllabic word that ends with a vowel with low rising, high falling, or neutral tones, said vowel reduplicates, but with the neutral or low tone. So you have the unmarked word pola, which means again. It doesn't need to be edited at all. You could say toshe polalo, which means I did something again. Then you have a word like show, which as an adverb becomes show, which it might just sound like it's longer, and that's pretty much what it is. Show versus show, which means regularly or often. So the sentence 是啦 show lol means they often do it. They often do something. Now, these rules apply for adverbs, those which are attached to a verb or adjective, but adverbials, appositives, and absolute phrases often take the topic position in a sentence and have their own rules, which we will discuss now. So adverbials, appositives, and absolute phrases often go to the front of a clause and take the non-nominal topic marker she. The adverbial with she at the end can either be the sole topic in a clause, or it can be followed by a nominal topic marker. So in situations where adverbials, appositives, and absolute phrases start the sentence, whatever they may be, that's a sentence where you can have more than one topic marker, and it doesn't just mean and. We'll talk about that part in a bit too. So, as an example, we have the word pola, as we talked about earlier. So, if you wanted to say, yet again, my knee hurts, you would say, pola shisho lo kuturim, which means, yet again, my knee hurts. You're putting the emphasis on the fact that it's happening again, thus you have that she non-nominal topic marker. Then, below, you have another sentence, pola shisei nishei la to kutu. That's a sentence that has two topic markers. The topic markers are both on the yet again and the worms, because you're saying, yet again, I bought worms, and you're emphasizing both the fact that it's yet again and the fact that it is worms that you bought. Both of those are grammatical. Now, prepositions. Prepositions are any of three suffixes that are applied to the topic markers. That's right, they are applied to the topic markers. They are as follows. The at, in suffix is sa. The with, on, or for suffix is sha. And the from, out of, away from kind of ablative suffix is na. The most common place for these to go is after direct object markers, though they can be placed after any of the marker particles to create various different linguistic effects. Here's an example. Taila niti mostam. Literally, I am going at the store, but as a sense, it is I am going in the store or I am moving about the store. Next sentence. Sei shemikami polimosnos. Which means he'll be behind the bush, or he must be behind that bush, or must be on the back of that bush. One last time, putting a preposition on a topic marker can create a new adverbial situation. So, which means in this house we are happy, or at home we are happy. As you can see, a topic marker has the preposition s or in attached to it, which basically gives the entire adverbial phrase at the beginning of the sentence the locative sense. Now, subordinate clauses. In order to create a subordinate clause, one may say the subordinate clause as if it was a full sentence, but the following dominant clause must begin with a reduplicated non-nominal topic marker. So, she, instead of the non-nominal topic marker, she. Also, the neutral mediopassive marker may be used if the dominant clause is merely copular. So, for a copular situation as the dominant clause, you would say sho, or occasionally just shosh. This sentence here, to shilo sho shosholi, means that which I did was bad. And then the following sentence, to shilo shishto to shohamil, means that which I did matters to me. One of them used the shosho and the other one used the shishi. Yes and no questions. So to ask a yes or no question, you make the verb the topic and give it the non-nominal marker before finishing the sentence with the word yi, which is derived from yipi, which means to be true. Now, use the full verb in polite circumstances, but that barely ever happens. So this sentence right here is asking if your knee is hurting, asking if one's knee is hurting. So, and for an even more basic question, like is it true or is that so, you can just say shi, or more politely, That was for true or false questions, but for open-ended questions, you'll need to know the question words, which are as follows. Who and what has a single question word, which has the noun of koni and the verb to. Then there's a question word for why, which is ha, and ha for the verb. And then you have a single question word for how, where, or which is kaho as a noun and ka as the verb. Now note that there's only 3 question words. Most of the time context makes this clear, but sometimes you'll see interesting constructions to get around these restrictions. They always find a way. So here's a couple open-ended questions. Lashe koni kuto, which means who or what are you? Since you're talking to a person and using a second person singular pronoun, so it's most likely who are you? You can gather that from context. You can see that you need both the noun question word and the verb question word in order to create a complete sentence. I mean, you need that for like a polite situation, but not necessarily all situations. If you're asking just a very general question, like the following, Shilato, is who or what are they? There's no koniku in there. You don't really need it, because in a casual sense, you're just asking, what the heck are those things? Or who are those people? Lo shi laku ha? Which is an interesting construction. The best English translation I could come up with is to do an action, why you? It's basically their way of saying, why did you do that? Why did you make the decision to do this thing? Lo shi laku ha? Our next sentence is ha shi laku lo, which invokes the why question verb as the topic of the sentence. So you can see it's up at the beginning of the sentence this time, and it has been given the non-nominal she topic marker. So it's really emphasizing the why in this. The best English translation I could come up with is, why is it the case that you did something? Like, why? It's like really emphasizing like that it doesn't make sense. Then we have the of particle, which can be used in a pretty similar sense to English's of. It can create genitive situations, or it can create adjectival situations out of different nouns using the particle ho. This word takes the position of a grammatical particle following a noun that is subordinate to the noun that comes after it. This is essentially used for prepositional phrases that are part of a larger noun phrase rather than connected to a verb. All the same, ho can carry the same sa, sha, or na suffixes to change its prepositional meaning in relation to the noun that follows it. So we have an example sentence: Seto mi Xomitec seko ho su ati ma su lu mola shami naimi, which translates to, the Showmill Empire has taken the responsibility of the anarchic territories. And you can see between responsibility and anarchic, there is the classic ho. And then we have inalienable and alienable possessions. There are two types of possessions, and they also can function grammatically as genitive markers as well, which behave the same way as the of particle mentioned prior. So these particles are o for alienable nouns and I for inalienable nouns. Things are alienable when they're not permanent, like acquaintances, food, pets, objects, etc. And things are inalienable when they are family members, body parts, elements of culture, etc. You can also distance yourself emotionally from something by literally alienating them, using the alienable marker on something that, like, for all reality purposes should be inalienable. We have two examples up here. La ai mi.te, which is your civilization, using the inalienable marker. And then lu osholimo, which is your soldiers. The soldiers are considered alienable. You know, they can go away, or they can stop being soldiers. Demonstratives. There are 3 demonstratives in Shomatec, which act in most ways as adjectives. The main difference between the demonstratives and adjectives grammatically is that they have their own particles as well. The demonstratives and their particles are te for this or these, tiki for that or those, and tapae for that or those far away. So a couple examples. Ti lopo means this man. Tiki sai meaning that child. Tapae soliaito meaning that mountain range all the way over there. And the grammarless forms. So sometimes a word is just stated as an interjection, or a dictionary term, or a chant, or just otherwise without any accompanying grammatical context. And this is where the grammarless form is often used. This is where the anglicization Showmill and phonolozation Xomitlun come from for the name of the country, Showmill. The grammarless forms for words that end with e or e is la, for y and u it's n, and for a and o it's sa. So the Showmill example is Shomi means to protect or protection, as a root word. The army of Shomil would chant Shomil repeatedly before battle, meaning just protection or protect, and thus the Phonals and the Permechikans alike named them based on this grammarless form, based on this thing that they say. It's the Shomi root is also in the mi.te, like the name of the language and the name that they use for the name of the language. Alright, and one of the last big things that we gotta talk about, or that I figured would be cool, is how Xomitec has influenced modern Permechikan since the conquest. So, by the time my comic, Dog Days, or Jojawa Joror, takes place, Shomil has ruled over the majority of the former Permechikan Empire for over 50 years. Now, Xomitec, as a language of the ruling class spoken by a small minority of the population, has had some influence trickle down to the modern Permechikan tongue. Now, Permechikan has one single phonemic vowel, but Xomitec has 6, or 24 if you count the tones. So, Xomitec loanwords in Permechikan are modified, like, pretty heavily to fit into the Permechikan phonology. The Xomitec word mi.te, which means shipment, that gets corrupted into the Permechikan word nguhmail. The Xomitec sahai, which means convoy, turns into the Permechikan shukhayul. Then you have Xomitec's she, which is just the singular noun topic marker, which turns into shun, which is an emphatic marker in modern Permechikan, saying, "It is so," or "You're right, it sure is." Then you also have another grammatical particle that blended into Permechikan. You have Xomitec's lu, the yes or no question verb. In Permechikan now, you can say lu as a question intensifying interjection. So you ask someone a question, they pause, then you say lu, like so. What'll it be? Is that a yes or a no? Like, come on, we need to know an answer. Lu. Alright, now that we've talked about the majority of the basics of the language that you need to know, let's do the sample text. The following text is a warning sent to the government of Elfwant Casanosha in 2011 AR during the Qrnql, or presidency, of Sako. The warning came in the form of a radio broadcast from one of the highest generals of Shomil, General Pahi Mahoi, or Vahi Mahoi, as the anglicization of the phonalization will put it, and in regards to recognizing the land claims of the empire over the former territory of Permechico, including some lands that the Phonals and Irkins were occupying at the time. So, big threat energy happening here. Saipul Pamashi Mashusu Miloli Lotoni Saitamo Hohkateo Hi Setomi Xomitec Seko Hosu Ati Mashulu Mola Shami Naimilm Loto Shesna Lemula Honasha Amashima O Mosho Emi Shilitami Setok Ipaim So Tulu Shi Oni Sedusho Holasho Omi Olomopom Opaili Shikakai Holan Puhani Kun Ai Hotai Hosen Sho Mola Nishoki Shomi Ikuni Shetai Mopaitos So Shitai La Shulo Omonis Nashan Milai Sho Shela Lisel Sha Shila Subokoto Mitnu Taila Toshe Susi Hua Nili Hua La Ai Nili Temonis Sultu Poli Sho Lipishi Ail Shishili O Soli Moshe La Tai Tola Nini Hua Taikota Mos Nos Ni Kitel Li Aikopa Tola Lol Pahi Mahoi.
Alright, and that's it. Thank you all so much for watching. Welcome to Agma Schwa 2023. I took January off as a vacation after the copious amount of work that went into the cursed Conlang circus. Not only that, but all kinds of things both with the YouTube channel and with my actual real life have been happening like crazy lately, so I've been super busy, leading to the only time when I've been able to have time to film and record this video being at like midnight after a day of hard landscaping. So if I look a little disheveled and chaotic and my stage doesn't look as clean as usual, that's my excuse for that one. So thank you to the patrons. Special thanks to our new patrons over on patreon.com/ng, being Michiro and Piper Cook. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to work with y'all and figuring out some cool new things that we can do with the Patreon and all that. I'm going to start putting some exclusive content on there too, so I'm not going to disclose what that is yet, but there's going to be some other special stuff on there. They've already been able to see all the comic developments, but there's going to be more than that soon, so I'll keep you updated. Other than that, there's going to be some juicy stuff coming soon, so keep yourselves tuned in. Thank you all for 6,000 subscribers. I have many ideas of special things that we could do, but these things keep happening faster and faster, so who knows, we might be at 7,000 by the time I'm ready to do the 6,000K special. So, whatever. Alright, I will see you guys next time. Nga is out.
Yeah, one more thing. If you have not yet subscribed to my second channel, The Velar Nasal, that's where you can find all of my musical projects, and I'm planning on putting some other videos that have absolutely nothing to do with any of the content I should be posting on this channel. So, if you like me in general and want to see the music that goes into these videos, and just other stuff in general that happens to have me in it, yeah, go subscribe to that. Also, AZ Plant Reviews exists too. Bye.